Bienvenue à la session scientifique du Département de médecine familiale de l'Université d'Ottawa. La session se veut bilingue. Vous êtes invité à poser vos questions dans la langue de votre choix. Bonne session. Cette présentation sera enregistrée et disponible sur la chaîne YouTube du Département de médecine familiale. En poursuivant la session, vous consentez à être enregistré si votre caméra ou microphone est activé. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the Department of Family Medicine YouTube channel. By continuing the session, you are consenting to be recorded if your camera or microphone is activated. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui à partir de nombreux endroits différents et dans un espace virtuel. Mais nous désirons commencer par reconnaître les terres sur lesquelles se trouve le département de médecine familiale de l'Université d'Ottawa, qui font partie du territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple Anishinaabe algonquin. Nous vous invitons à réfléchir à votre propre emplacement au Canada par rapport au territoire où vous vous trouvez aujourd'hui. Nous reconnaissons aussi les gardiens des savoirs traditionnels, jeunes et âgés. Nous honorons leurs courageux dirigeants d'hier, d'aujourd'hui et de demain.
Nimanajiananig, mamiwinini anishinabeg, ogo ka nagadawabandajig, iyo aki ekoweshkad, akonongom egawikad ki migiwewaj. Nimanajiananig kakina anishinabeg undaje kaye ogog kakina eneagizijig enekukamegak kanadang eje udapinagig endawajin udawang.
We are gathered today from many different locations and in a virtual space, but we wish to begin by recognizing the land on which the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Ottawa is located, which is part of the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. We invite you to think about your own location in Canada in relation to the territory where you find yourself today. We also acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March edition of Family Medicine Grand Rounds, which is brought to you by the Civic Melrose campus. My name is Doug Archibald. I'm the Director of Research and Innovation for the Department of Family Medicine, and I'll be today's moderator. We're privileged today to have three presentations, and I'll introduce our first speaker, and that is Dr. Michael Malek. Dr. Malek obtained his family physician certificate in 1997 and has practiced as a solo physician for 10 years. He then moved to the Ottawa Hospital Academic Family Health Team in 2008 and is currently staff physician and preceptor for family medicine residents. His clinical interests are in geriatrics, long-term care practice, and palliative care. He is a postgraduate residency director at the Civic Melrose campus and has been there since 2018 as the director. And he recently completed a Master's of Education in Health Professions Education at the University of Ottawa in 2021. So congratulations, Mike. And now I will turn things over to you.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Doug, for the nice introduction. So, yeah, going from my Master's of Education right into the hopper here. So I was actually approached by two outstanding medical students who really pretty much did the entire work on this project, Alicia and Adam, outstanding fourth-year medical students at U Ottawa, and who are going to go on to great things, along with my resident in crime, Dr. Elias Horner. So this is really their main presentation. I'm just the driver of the bus here. So this study using point of view, wearable technology as a tool in virtual teaching sessions to supplement medical students' skills training. So my daughter told me that POV is not power of veto from Big Brother, but it's point of view. So, this project really it's allowing me to go into the shallow end of the research pool here. And when they approached me with this, it was right in the midst of the pandemic. Everyone's struggling, especially medical students, with their limited clinical exposure, especially to in-person teaching. And so they came with a concrete problem, which was quite legit. And I was kind of skeptical, but when they sort of talked to me about using virtual platforms to augment their teaching, I was quite interested. So the purpose of this was to try to see what we could do to address any learning gaps that the current medical students were experiencing in their medical school training due to the pandemic. Their main purposes were the following. They really wanted to see if they can bridge some of these clinical teaching gaps with different types of virtual learning opportunities to help them at least achieve some of these core competencies. And in particular, this study was trying to use this point of view wearable technology to see if this might be a new and interesting way to get across some clinical teaching skills. And the third was more to see if this could expand on already growing literature on the use of wearable technology in education. So in this study, we did seek ethics approval. We recruited medical students in their first, second, and third years at U Ottawa, and they were sent a link through their medical society or their the med school email list to ask for voluntary participation. And the participation was for two 90-minute teaching sessions. And this was going to be broadcast through a chest-mounted camera along with another view in the room. So it's two views broadcast in the room. Our chief resident, Dr. Horner, was the resident who was going to perform the abdominal physical examination. And this was following the guidelines from the PSD course in years 1 and 2 in terms of the objectives for the physical examination, focusing on abdominal exam. The participants who were going to join in were going to be asked to complete pre and post-event surveys on their impression of the event, what challenges they saw, what benefits they saw, and as a unique learning modality. So as you can see, this funky little harness here is not something you want to wear in the airport, but this was a chest-mounted camera that the resident had to directly visualize the session. There was also another camera in the room to provide a different angle. There was a research assistant that was monitoring the group chat as well as any questions that this medical students had for the residents, and this was conducted on Zoom. So as I mentioned earlier, we recruited students from first and second and third year, mostly first and second year students. And they participated by registering on a link that was sent to them. And then, the next step was for them to complete a pre-event survey. And from there, it was on a first come, first basis. And they were trying to get about 30 students in total. So I'll show you the questionnaires in a moment. So in terms of the data collection, basically they were trying to get to show if this event with the virtual teaching was of a significant benefit. And from a significance, they were aiming for a p-value of less than 0.05. I learned something new about this Cohen's d coefficient, which is basically a mechanism to try to study the effect size of such a significance. So in addition to this quantitative data that was collected with the surveys, there was also an opportunity for participants to share their written responses about various themes that I'll mention in a second. So a bit of a mixed study. So here's a snapshot of the questions in the pre and post-event surveys. The first 4 or 5 are very similar. So basically asking, as a participant, I feel comfortable participating in this type of fashion. I think I will enjoy this experience. I think this is going to augment my learning. I think this will be similar to some of the videos that in the past they've been sent for the PSD courses. This might improve my comfort in performing physical examinations. So there was a lot of questions that were similar in the pre and post questions, post-event. And the remainder 4 questions were pertaining solely to after the event. In terms of the qualitative questions that we were seeking, we were basically asking them, what did you gain from this experience? What were the pros and cons of the experience? And any feedback on how this could help in the future. So this survey basically went out, to everyone, and 55 medical students completed the initial pre-event survey. They had a good response, for which we were able to hold 2 events, each 90 minutes, about 20 per session. And after that, 38 of those 41 completed the post-event survey, and the 38 people were those that were analyzed in this study. So here's a bit of a snapshot of the results here. I'll just focus on, so the first 3 basically were showing that there was not much of a statistical significance in terms of the pre and post event for those first 3 questions. And the thought was that they went into this session thinking that this was going to be highly beneficial to their learning, and that they were definitely going to enjoy this, especially like question number 2. So that was not really surprising to us, that the pre and post event surveys were similar on those types of questions. Where we were pleasantly surprised were the next 3 questions, were that the patient interaction was comparable to an in-person clinical encounter. So that was felt to be statistically significant, and this Cohen's D coefficient of 0.75 was potentially illustrating that this was a high effect on that particular question. And similarly, they thought this was better than watching pre-recorded videos, which is the standard for the PSD program prior to their in-person lectures or classes. And finally, they felt it was definitely beneficial to improving their knowledge on performing a focused physical examination. And we were happy to see that all 38 participants mentioned they would be interested in doing this again for future systems examinations. What I thought was the most, to me, the most important and relevant part was, what was their actual comments aside from the statistical stuff that we just saw. Many of them thought that this type of viewing in a synchronous type of teaching session was very beneficial for their learning. They were having good views. Some actually felt it was better than an in-person experience because they're struggling to see what the clinician is teaching. They thought it was highly organized. They thought the resident was very engaged in the process and really clearly explained step-by-step of the abdominal examination. They had some suggestions about how to improve it for future events in terms of improving the audio-video quality. There was a good mention here, but from an event organization standpoint, about maybe incorporate a clinical case to add some additional relevance to their teaching. The other themes that were approached were about audience engagement. So, often, as I mentioned, people thought it was quite exciting to ask real-time questions and the interactive format. They thought that this was probably better than the current PSD videos that they're asked to watch on their own time before they have the live sessions in their PSD course. And they had some suggestions about how to improve some of the software to enhance this session even further. And then finally, in terms of how this could impact on the medical curriculum, potentially linking it a little bit more closely with what they're being taught in first and second year, so it aligns better with their learning GI. Then the abdominal exam would be presented at that time. So that was some useful feedback. So looking at the results from this study, there's a couple of main things that we picked up, and that, as I mentioned, students felt this was a very engaging way to promote this type of learning, and almost comparable to in-person learning environments. So one caveat I have to say, though, is that many of these students started medical school when the pandemic started, so they may not really know what the in-person clinical experience for this PSD course might entail. So they're basically going on, watching videos and doing things with different types of e-learning. The students felt more confident with doing a physical examination, in this case, the abdominal physical exam, and seemed to enjoy this wearable technology to help really showcase what they were trying to teach. having the 2 camera angles they found was quite helpful, just to see where are the hands being placed, what am I auscultating, and supported by the excellent explanation from the residents. And furthermore, this is based on other studies that have been done with wearable technology, and that this could certainly serve moving forward once we're out of the pandemic, about addressing other gaps when it comes to clinical education and using other types of virtual platforms for both synchronous and asynchronous learning in the future. We took a couple of important suggestions from this in terms of how can we improve the technical aspects of such a study, and how this could be potentially used in other settings, whether it's for procedural skills or other clinical observerships. This could even benefit for those who are in remote communities, or if a resident or a student is outside of their home environment, they can participate in this fashion. And then, furthermore, we could, expand upon this and perhaps get a little bit more bang for our buck with a larger sample size. So, only having 38 students, somewhat limited, but we only had a limited amount of time to recruit some of the students. And that's pretty much the amazing show that those students really put on for us.
Mike, that was a great presentation. And yeah, certainly an area to explore for sure. As the UGME undergoes curriculum renewal, I mean, certainly a part of this is to have more active learning, and this sort of falls certainly into that camp, as well as embracing technology. So that's terrific. Thank you. Yes, let's open the door to questions.
Thanks, Mike. Great presentation. Congratulations on leading the group, and really interesting results. So you should definitely, to me, this is a publication. There is the College of Family Physicians actually just did a call out again for, the resident research reports and student reports. So there might be an opportunity there where the medical students could look at publishing in the University of Ottawa Journal as well. So it would be very suitable for either one of those, and I would be happy to work with you to try to do that. Secondly, there's a huge potential programmatically, as I think about our disseminated and discussions about like our distributed medical education, and discussions about creating more pipelines for people in rural and remote communities and the Indigenous stream. So I think it's really great work, and you need to keep going with it. So let's talk about that. The third thing, just for everybody else to know, is that this project did get supported by the Department of Family Medicine. I believe we did purchase and support some of the equipment, and it was a modest amount. I mean, I don't even think it was less. It was less than 5,000, less than 1,000 even, I think, Mike.
I think it was in the 500 range, yeah. But,
500, yeah.
I apologize. I forgot to acknowledge that component. Well, you're absolutely right.
That's okay. I had to put that plug in, but it's more for everybody else on the call to see. This is a simple idea. It's modest in terms of cost. There is discretionary funding at the department, and now actually more formalized money available to support exactly this type of these types of ideas and initiatives. And the other piece too, Mike, is that this did start, I think, as a resident project, that you basically have your nice team of undergrad medical students, your resident, and then yourself as the staff. So really nice example of a team approach. You didn't do it alone. It was, everybody working together, and a simple idea, but really nice, effective, simple methods that has found and demonstrated some really, very key results. And even if the results had been that, oh, this didn't actually work, well, that would have been hugely important as well. So great work, excellent example of academic and scholarly activity. And I really hope that you continue with it. So I was excited to see this. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Claire. And actually, to follow up on your first point, actually the manuscript we've already into our second draft of it, so we're pretty much there in terms of ready to submitting this. So
great presentation, and very, very interesting work. I'm a little bit distant from undergraduate education. So I haven't done PhD for over 20 years. And the one thing that I wonder about in terms of both the videos that have been done as well as your study is how you get across the tactile aspects of the actual exam. And how do you deal with teaching the abnormal findings? Because what I'm assuming is this is how to approach the physical exam, but not how to interpret what you find.
Yeah, this is attempting to replicate what's normally happening in a non-pandemic world for the clinical exam teaching, basically focusing on the normal. So I think the highlight for this is, not to replace what has been done in the past, but given, our world in the last 2 years. But you're right, it is missing the, being 2 feet away from the examiner to watch the tactile experience. So it's more for the future e-learning and perhaps learning in an asynchronous fashion too, where this might benefit.
Our second speaker, and that is Dr. Jason Trikovic, who's a medical graduate from the University College Dublin after he completed his family medicine residency at the University of Saskatchewan. And after that, he completed an additional year of residency in emergency medicine and practiced both in Saskatoon and Meadow Lake for 3 years. In Meadow Lake, he practiced full scope family medicine and held roles as the Emerge Department Director at the rural site. Upon return to Ottawa, he joined the Queensway Carleton Emerge Department as locum staff, where along with other frontline workers dealt with our most recent COVID-19 pandemic. Recently, he's joined the Academic Family Medicine Health Unit, Civic Melrose, where he's heavily been involved in their new long-term care initiative. He's excited to be back in family medicine as teaching. It is a great passion of his. He's interested in point-of-care ultrasound and its future role in family medicine. And he's also interested in studying ways to improve communication between all provision healthcare stakeholders, family physicians, emerge physicians, and those practicing long-term care.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Jason Trikovic, and I'm one of the staff physicians at the Civic Family Health Team. Today I'm going to present to you where we are 1 year later after starting a West End Villa long-term care learning initiative. And the theme is going to be, are we closing the gap? So I'd like to say thank you first off to Maddie for helping with some of the analysis, as well as Melissa Radcliffe for her help in disseminating the study. I'd also like to say thank you to Dr. Wiltorton and Dr. Professeur for helping read over the survey and make some corrections and some additions. And also to all the residents and preceptors and nurse practitioners that are working at West End Villa, thank you very much for all your hard work and your input. I have no conflicts of interest, and I have received REB exemption for this project. So with that, I'd like to jump into where I was 1 year ago when we presented at DFM Grand Rounds. And we were pitching this idea of starting this initiative. And the reason we did that, or we thought this initiative was important, is because we had a blind spot in our resident long-term care curriculum. They just were not getting exposure in the community. At the same time, we were asked to come and help with a home that was in need of physicians, and we decided to jump right in, and we designed 3 goals, I should say. First, to build a family medicine resident long-term care competencies in the community setting, as well as increase the number of graduating residents that choose to practice long-term care after graduating. We also wanted to improve the physician's job satisfaction by providing some diversity in the work that we do. We designed an educational experience. We identified that assessing, or I should say evaluating behavioral change as it relates to this learning initiative was going to be challenging. And we used the Kirkpatrick Model for evaluation as a scaffolding to kind of see where we were going to evaluate this program. So what gaps are we talking about? We are talking about gaps in residential care. Are we closing that gap? We're talking about gaps in the evaluation process. Are we anywhere closer to fine-tuning that and having a more accurate evaluation process? Are we talking about gaps in the residency competencies, and are we closing the gap in terms of where they were then and now? And are we closing that gap in terms of the long-term care workforce? The easy answer to all these questions is yes, we are closing that gap. But first, I want to really, before we get into the academic nuances of evaluating a learning initiative, I really don't want to lose sight of the resident care, because that's why we kind of jumped into this. And here I have a graph of data of avoidable ED visits. Weston Villa, and I guess this is avoidable ED visits per capita, and we have Weston Villa in blue. We have the Champlain Health Region average in green, and in gray we have the provincial average. And as you can see, each of these groups of bars is annualized data except for the last one. What we can see is that in 2014, 2015, Weston Villa unfortunately was not at the front of the pack and at the back of the pack, and we were sending a lot of people to emerge. This trend continued in 2016, 2017. What we can see is that in 2020 to 2021, mainly 2021, that blue graph line has come down significantly. And what that indicates is that we are not sending as many people to the emergency department as we did previously. It also is in line with the Champlain average, is actually less than that, and it's at par with the provincial average. And if we look at more granular data, which is the last quarter that we have access to, we see that that blue line has come down all the way past both the region and the province. And if we are to rank ourselves in terms of how we're doing versus other reportable homes in the Champlain region, we're tied for second in terms of the lowest amount of people being sent to emerge. So it's one data point. We're part of a team, including the MPs, but I think it speaks to some of the work that we're doing and that it matters. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about our survey that we did to evaluate this learning objective. I'm also going to talk about the future, which is going to include some of the limitations of the data we amass from this, as well as bringing it all together in a SWOT analysis. So first of all, the survey data and the methodology. We didn't just measure the traditional cognitive competencies and how the change of this, how the residents perceive change in their competencies. We wanted to look at non-cognitive aspects of learning. And we focused in on two kind of groups or themes, and that was the personal attributes that people had before and after they entered this long-term care experience, and the future impact. Were they going to do something different as it pertains to their careers moving forward? And these sometimes kind of help us besides some of the data we get from the traditional changes in competencies that we sometimes assess in learning initiatives. Once again, I said we were going to kind of build on the scaffolding of an evaluation, hierarchy known as the Kirkpatrick Model. And, what we identified is this behavioral change aspect, which is difficult for a lot of people, was going to be challenging. We had some proxies that we had identified, which are indicated in orange. And this is some of the stuff that we kind of were going to check. Our survey was a confidential 35-item survey, and it was completed in February, March of this year via Google Forms. The population was residents and medical students at the Civic and Riverside family health groups that participated in West End Villa Learning Initiative and that were currently in the program. We piloted the survey with 2 residents, 3 staff, and 2 academic reviewers, and we had a completion rate of approximately 73%. Our survey had the traditional demographic data, a resident QI, what was going well, what could be changed, and the traditional perception of changes through the pre-post survey incompetences. Where it varied a little bit was when we looked at personal attributes and future activities, which I'll talk about it in a little bit. The analysis, well, the pre-post survey questions were analyzed with a paired sample t-test, and the means were ratings between responses were compared before and after the long-term care experience. And we did this for each question as well as aggregate in those themes that we had talked about. We used IBM, or I should say Maddie helped us use IBM SPSS Statistics version 28. And in terms of the quality improvement part, we used a thematic analysis to kind of group the open-ended responses that we got. In terms of the demographic data, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there wasn't too much that was surprising. There was a little bit of a skew towards males over females in terms of participation. And there was more residents coming from the Civic than the Riverside, and that's in line with the distribution of residents that we have. We did have, in terms of levels of training, some people completed this as a medical student, some just solely in their PGY1, some in both years, PGY1 and 2, and some just in PGY 2 years. It's interesting to say that a lot of the survey respondents were at some point in their PGY 2 year and therefore closer to practice. It also should be noted that while it seems like 47% of people did have some long-term care experience before, there's a paucity of long-term care experience where most people only had 1 to 5 hours of exposure. In terms of pre-post data, well, here is the 18 questions that we had where it relates to those themes that we were talking about, that middle perceived competencies being the traditional one, the personal attributes and future impact being a little bit of the non-cognitive aspects. We see that for most questions, there was a significant difference going in the right way, meaning people felt a lot more better after leaving the long-term care initiative. But there were 3 questions that did not reach significance before and after the intervention. And I think that realistically, that's where a lot of our input or information will come from the analysis of this data run. So if we look at those 3 questions that showed no change before and after the long-term care learning intervention, we see they were all in the domains of future impact. And the first question that did not reach significance was residents' desire to seek research opportunities after participating in the long-term care learning initiative. Another one was their desire to seek long-term care extracurriculars after they completed the learning initiative. And the third one being, were they more interested in pursuing the PGY3 Care of the Elderly Fellowship? So, it really kind of validates what we thought before. These were all things that we thought might indicate behavioral change, and we knew that behavioral change was going to be hard to actually monitor and evaluate. And it seems like this is true for this. And I'll talk a little bit what I think about this moving forward. In terms of the QI themes, I wanted to represent all residents and give them, share all the feedback that we got. But if we think about it in themes, it seems like 4 of the 14 people that responded to this question, which is what would ensure a better learning experience, wanted formalization of content, wanted more case-based teaching. Surprisingly, they wanted more autonomy, which I think is a very positive thing. And they wanted a little bit more continuity, although, looking at the program, we try to always keep people with the same preceptor and the same group of people, but this is something maybe we need to look into. In addition, they wanted an orientation, a more formal orientation up front. In terms of what should be omitted, there wasn't too much there. People were a little bit disgruntled about one person was about the documentation, which is fair enough. And when we asked what they think would make them incorporate long-term care in their future practice, we see that mentorship was a big part of this. So this is something we can definitely look into. Some people had already made decisions. 3 of the 14 people that responded to this had already made that decision that they were going to practice long-term care. And some people wanted compensation information, which is something that we can just attach, I think, in that mentorship module or that formal mentorship program. People wanted to understand if there was actually a need for them, and that's something we can clarify. And one person wanted some urgent care education. I guess being on call might be a way for us to get them some exposure to this. So how that relates onto our kind of scaffolding of the Kirkpatrick model, well, I think we're pretty satisfied. I think people are satisfied and engaged. I think that we do have to start a competency self-assessment in some form. We need to finalize our learning objectives as well as our orientation, and maybe include some urgent care teaching and maybe putting the residents on call. We need to formalize a mentorship program, and I think this is going to be an indicator of behavioral change if we get a lot of people participating in it. And we will add a billing discussion in that. What we really need to assess is, are these good proxies, or is it just too early? Have we missed the mark with asking these questions and using this as proxies for behavioral change, or is it just too early? And I think we'll keep on evaluating this and see if we need to change this moving forward. I think it should be noted, though, that we have 3 residents that are interested in starting working in long-term care, so this is great. Looking forward, there was some weaknesses in the evaluation or limitations of our study. First, this is the first iteration of data collected, so we got to take things with a grain of salt. Pre-post data, it's perceived change. It's not by itself something that we can kind of hang our hat on, so we need to supplement this with maybe some formal assessment. Non-cognitive aspects of the survey, a lot of debate, their importance. We're going to look into maybe fine-tuning this moving forward. And we don't have a preceptor satisfaction survey to overlay on this. So that's something that is pending, and I'm going to look if there's any common threads between the two. So putting it all together, and a SWOT analysis is one in which we look at internal strengths and weaknesses and look at external opportunities and threats. Well, I think some of the strengths that we have in our program, likely there is learning that is occurring. There's 3 residents that want to practice long-term care. The learning needs are very doable right now. I think we can really execute this. And it's a positive thing that the learners are seeking autonomy. In terms of weakness, well, we have no formal logic model, something that we're doing ad hoc as we kind of go through this. There's no formalized assessment yet to validate some of the perceived learning changes that we saw. And there is some preceptor attrition, which may be a problem, obviously, in a learning program. When we look at the opportunities, well, I think we need some insight from our preceptors, and this is in progress. We have a highly resourced TCU upstairs, which I think is a great possibility to bring in people that are looking for innovative solutions in long-term care. And we have a very supportive home that supports us in learning initiatives. In terms of threats, well, there's a lot of changes coming ahead with long-term care, with us being under the magnifying glass after COVID. There's an aging physician population that I think is very in need of young, of physicians coming in with maybe different mindsets. And this isn't happening yet, so that's a danger. And we know research is going to push and make long-term care better, and it doesn't seem like there's an appetite for residents to do that right now. I'll leave it with this. When you transform the learner, you transform care, and I think that's what we're focused on, transforming that learner so we can offer good long-term care to our patients. And so I thank you. There are my references, and I open the floor to any questions. Thank you.
Really nice work. I love how you pulled the quality data in terms of the avoidable ED visits, because ultimately that's what we're all trying to do, is improve care of a population. It'll be really interesting to, the visual trend that you have suggests that, you are having an impact, although obviously there's confounders, but that's amazing. So keep going with that. And then I thought, again, my question actually is whether or not, have you connected now with, our care of the elderly program leads and with the other, with our curriculum director in terms of the long-term care curriculum and the modules, I think, that have already been, developed in other places. So I'm just wondering if you've done those connections yet, and if not, happy to basically bring the group together.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Claire. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Two points. First off, on that data that was presented, I was trying to get through it pretty fast. I really want to say it wasn't just the nurse practitioners, it's also all the staff at Weston Villa. And you're totally right. That's one data point. That's one piece of the puzzle. But I think it's definitely positive. So I'm pretty proud of that for our team. In terms of the second point, I think definitely I need to connect with the care of the elderly program formally, look at their modules, but we have to remember that this is being done in the community setting. And some of those ideas, while are transferable, there's a lot of resource issues that are different in the community setting. And we could probably, take some of the ideas, but I think we need to also be thinking from that community standpoint all the time. So I'm going to be pretty challenging on that point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think that my point is that there's probably a lot of curriculum already out there. Celeste Fung is working on some of the research stuff, e-consult long-term care. She's at St. Patrick's, and there's a good team. So to me, I think where you started was excellent. And I think, I congratulate you on the work that you've done. I love how you linked it back to where you were at and just sort of thinking about it a year ago and now what you've done. So again, another fantastic example. coming out of the Ottawa Hospital Family Health Team in terms of how to basically put your passion, your interest, your clinical interest, and then do scholarly work with it, which is going, like, this is very, very impactful. So well done. And then the next step again would be, I think, as I said, where I'm sitting as the chair, I'm like, okay, I know this person has done this. So I'm going to connect the dots for you. And then I think that will, it can only strengthen what you're doing. And then you pick and choose, as you said, what's going to be applicable into your context. But well done.
And yeah, and last thing on that, Claire, sorry, is I have reached out to Alicia, Dr. Fung. We're talking about how she's incorporated e-consult into the, into that aspect. And I want to make sure that best practices are being done at Weston Villa. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jason. That's fabulous. I'd like to now move to our third presentation, and that's Dr. Sarah Rice and Dr. Victoria Swan. And I believe that Dr. Rice is going to be doing the presentation. Dr. Rice is the Director of Family Medicine Obstetrics in Ottawa and practices at the Melrose Family Medicine Health Team. She's been providing antenatal and interpartum care for 20 years and is part of the MAMA group at Civic Hospital. And aside from obstetrics, she has an interest in women's health and vulnerable populations. Dr. Swan is a family physician at Melrose as well and practices low-risk obstetrics with the MAMA group at Civic Campus. And she's working towards improving residents' exposure and building their competencies in women's health, as well as evaluating and optimizing clinic workflows. So, Dr. Rice, over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. Excellent. I'm really happy to be here this morning, and I'll try to talk quickly. I know our morning's moving along smoothly. And thank you to our previous presenters, also excellent presentations. So my colleague, Dr. Swan, unfortunately, she is not here today, but we work together and supervise the dedicated obstetrics clinic. Just want to make sure everybody can see what's going on here. That's the fast way to do my presentation. All right. So the title of my work today that I'll be presenting that we've done together is a survey of residents' clinical and learning experiences in a family medicine obstetrics clinic. And again, this is work that we've done on our dedicated prenatal clinic at the Melrose Family Health Team. So my outline, here's my outline. I'll be discussing why a dedicated clinic, the proposed benefits, talking about our clinic setup, survey that we did a year ago and presenting the data and looking at opportunities for improvement. Just a bit of background, why is it important for our residents to learn about pregnant women? Well, competency in maternity and newborn care is a prerequisite for certification in family medicine in Canada. And despite a downward trend in family medicine practitioners providing interpartum care, many still do antenatal care. And why is there a need for a prenatal dedicated clinic? There has been in the past, when we used to do many, many years ago at Melrose, the residents training there would be assigned pregnant women longitudinally, and this was a bit of a scheduling nightmare. It was a big administrative burden, and many of the women would be assigned to residents over the 9 months, but then over time there'd be post-call days, vacation days, and the scheduling would turn into a little bit of a nightmare, and women would lose continuity with the residents. And so, additionally, the women's care was not well coordinated, and there was not really anybody overseeing their care path. And this led to errors happening. And finally, like everything else in medicine, the complexity of maternity care is increasing. So how do we promote family medicine obstetrics to residents and educate them well? There are not a lot of studies, but the ones that I could find talk about a favorable learning experience for the residents and also to have mentors. There are lots of proposed benefits to having this dedicated clinic. There's the guarantee of continuity of care throughout their pregnancy and an early introduction to their possible delivering provider. For residents, there's many, many benefits, including exposure to different models of antenatal care, creating opportunities to meet the required competencies, ensuring that each resident gets exposure to prenatal care. And by standardizing prenatal care and practices through formalized resident teaching and increasing residents' awareness of current antenatal guidelines and practices. And also there's the opportunity for residents to focus their obstetrical knowledge towards their own area of interest and teaching around topics. For staff, there's establishing a local referral resource for colleagues and the opportunity for shared care, strengthening our relationship within our clinic with our allied health colleagues, our dietitian, pharmacists, and also our OB colleagues at the hospital and in the community, and a financial benefit because all of these visits are out of basket. It appears that having a dedicated obstetrical clinic could have many benefits. So in 2017, the Melrose Family Health Team gave birth to a centralized family medicine obstetrics clinic. And in 2020, we formalized teaching. It was introduced with weekly rounds and also chart reviews. This is what a typical clinic would look like for us. It's a half a day a week. And from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, there are teaching rounds. It's usually almost always resident led, and they choose their topic of interest and the staff will moderate it. Sometimes we have guest speakers, our allied health, and also the FMOB staff will do some of the talks throughout the year. From 9 to 9:30, there are chart rounds. And again, this is teaching around clinical cases. The residents will know the week before that they're in clinic and that they need to review the patients and see if there's anybody that they know so that there can be possible continuity of care. From 9:30 to 12, we see patients. There's usually 2 to 3 patients booked every 30 minutes. And the clinic will have, these days, because it's so busy, 2 FMOB staff, usually 2 residents and often 1 medical student. And there will be a total of 12 to 17 patients each half day. So about a year ago, we decided to do a survey. We had been doing our formalized teaching for a year, and we wanted to see what the residents thought about it. So we gave it out to all of the PGY 1 and 2 residents at Melrose. It was anonymous, and you can see we had 19 responses. Most of them were PGY 1s. We asked if they had participated in the clinic with us, and they all had. Most of them, except for 1, enjoyed the teaching session. That was the session at 8:30. For the chart review, everybody found that helpful. And the majority assessed the OB clinic to be a good or excellent learning opportunity, and nobody had a negative learning opportunity, more importantly. So we asked if they were planning to provide antenatal care in their future, and 2/3 of the respondents were interested in providing care beyond the first trimester, up to or even beyond 20 weeks of gestational age. And this is very reassuring that there's the interest and the competency to practice antenatal care, and it helps us to focus our teaching and resources towards facilitating their learning in those first 2 trimesters. We asked if they felt prepared, and about half were unsure and half said yes, keeping in mind that these are primarily PGY 1s who are responding. But again, we need to consider how we can better prepare them to provide antenatal care within their career goals. We had free text questions. We asked what they like about the OB clinic, and a common answer is really their appreciation for consolidation of learning opportunities in prenatal care. And also what they like about the OB clinic was the teaching environment. They liked the formalized teaching opportunities around prenatal care with our teaching rounds, the chart review rounds, and case-based teaching. And we had a lot of positive comments about their support for the preceptors in the clinic. Another question that we asked was how we could improve antenatal OB learning. And a lot of residents expressed an interest in going to actually more antenatal clinics than the 2 or 3 that they go to that year. And also they want to follow patients longitudinally, which is interesting because this is, again, what we had sort of tried to move away from, but there was a lot of interest expressed in that. So we're considering how we can support residents to increase their antenatal clinic exposures. We're contemplating whether to have a standardized number of clinics that they're required to go to, and then maybe leave some free for those who are more interested to obtain extra exposure. We've even recently had a resident come from her ER rotation to do some extra time in the clinic. And we also want to support a plan for residents to more formally follow patients longitudinally. Since this was an interest of theirs, we'd like to see if we can make that happen. And we could perhaps use the dedicated OB clinic as their foundation and the backbone to be able to schedule the appointments. And then if they're out of rotation and can't see the woman, we'll be able to support them with that. So how can we improve the OB learning? We also were, they want more formal teaching resources and maybe to have a more set structure for topics to be including a plan to define what's led by staff, allied health, and the residents. And we also enjoyed them picking their topics because they got to focus on their learning gaps and areas of interest. They really liked that. And we found that they've done many topics that we wouldn't even have thought about suggesting. For resources, we've spent a lot of time trying to develop a pool of resources for residents to access for tests to order and the evidence of that, common requisitions, and point of care resources and websites for the patient and for residents and providers. There was the suggestion of having more simulation sessions and hands-on skills. However, that is done elsewhere during their training time. One of our most common issues that we have and need to improve at the clinic is our documentation. This has really been a major frustration for ourselves as physicians navigating an EMR that doesn't allow integration of our current Ontario prenatal record. So we're trying to balance introducing learners to the prenatal record that they'll likely use in their future practice and inefficient documentation. Often it leads to duplication in the clinic because we're still using paper charts for the Ontario antenatal records. So that's a real source of frustration, something that we're working with other OB providers in the hospital and the IT team to try to change. There is the desire from residents to have longer time, and really how we've addressed that is to have 2 FMOB staff in the clinic so that PGY ones can take more time if they need it, and especially with the initial prenatals, and then the other staff can see the overflow if we're running behind. So how else can we improve it? Our most common reply to the question was that learners were actually satisfied with the current clinic model. Similarly to our other question about improving it, we saw a lot of desire for people wanting to come to more clinics and to follow patients longitudinally, and introducing different care models. So I think that we're going to work on having a talk that talks about different care models and helping residents transition from their residency and how to do antenatal care in their future practices. And as we mentioned, we want to also provide more resources for them to be able to access even when they graduate. So I'm reflecting on that survey data and looking at how we can improve that clinic. There are opportunities for clinical care, again, for fostering mentorship opportunities for interested residents and colleagues, for improving longitudinal prenatal care opportunities that I've spoken about, and coordinating care with our interested colleagues. So this could either be with obstetrics or our colleagues at Melrose, integrating them more into the clinic or having set appointments when the pregnant woman will actually go back and see their primary preceptor. Also, opportunities for improvement in teaching. We'll formalize our teaching around curriculum to emphasize the competencies set out by the college. and also focus a little bit more on generating e-field notes in each clinics to enhance residents' feedback and learning around the cases. And as I mentioned, developing a stronger resource base for our residents. And lastly, opportunities for research. So we'd like to repeat our survey this spring to assess the changes in perceived competency after 2 years of exposure to our current obstetrical clinic. And also we'd like to consider surveying other sites who do not have a dedicated clinic to compare residents' learning experiences, and maybe attempt in the future to survey our graduated residents to see if they're providing antenatal care and what they wish that we had taught them. So ultimately, we'd like the residents to graduate with a strong knowledge and around antenatal care, and women who have a smooth, enjoyable antenatal care in our clinic. And they'll return back with their newborn baby to receive care with their primary care preceptor and postpartum care, well baby care, and that's it. So thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we got people can stay on for an extra minute. We've got a couple of questions, comments here. So first Claire, then Owen.
Fantastic work. I'm so impressed. I'm like grinning ear to ear because this is exactly the type of stuff that I was hoping to see. So congratulations on the on your work. The survey. So yes, you can survey your residents, and there already is a survey through the College of Family Physicians of Canada. We just got the results. T3, 3 years out in practice. You can actually, if the questions don't align with what you want, you can add in and request to have questions added in that would be more specific. But if you haven't seen the T3 survey, Doug has just done an analysis of the results, and it does get distilled down to our own program. It's small sample size, but that information is already there. And then, as I said, the college actually welcomes programs to insert and request to have some additional questions put in. So we should follow up on that. And Doug, you can maybe share some of that information in terms of where we'll be presenting it at, actually, I can show some of it at the retreat if you're going to be there. So, but that's all there. So nice work.
Excellent. Yep. Owen.
These guys are great. Victoria and Sarah are so collegial and excited and want to promote this stuff. It's had the additional benefit of helping maintain my competence and confidence in providing, care to people who are pregnant. So they're really good. We really appreciate it here at the Civic.
Sure. Well, thanks for that comment, Owen, and thank you, Sarah, and all our presenters this morning. Before you leave today, Maddie's going to put up a link for a survey. And this survey is to better help us match people in terms of your research, program evaluation, scholarly interests. Please fill it in between now and the retreat, actually, if you could, and we'll try and do a little bit of matching. So just as Claire is going to be doing with our folks in long-term care curriculum interests. So please do that, and look forward to hopefully seeing you all at the retreat, and certainly for next Family Medicine Grand Round. So thank you all very much.